responsibility and how to become a more informed and engaged citizen in our American democratic process. All right, so the first thing I'm going to ask, the first thing I want to say is I want to thank the Montgomery City County Public Library for giving me the opportunity to engage our young citizens of Montgomery, Alabama once again this year and help them to understand the importance of becoming more civically engaged and responsible. So thank you, Montgomery City County Public Library, and I want to thank you, the students, for listening to this lecture and engaging in this lecture and learning more about what you can do to become a more responsible, engaged citizen here in Montgomery, Alabama. So I know you all are very, very excited and ready for school again, right? Yay! Ready for school again. And I hate that we can't see each other like we typically do due to COVID-19, but that's okay because we're going to make the most of it and make the best of it via this video lecture. All right. So the first thing I want to ask you all see where I'm located, right? I'm going to pan the camera around so that you all can take a look down this corridor behind me, this beautiful fountain behind me as well, okay? And all the buildings around me. So can someone tell me, where am I? Where is she located? Where is she standing this afternoon? Anyone want to take a wild guess at it? I'm sure you all already know, okay? So you all are very bright, astute, intelligent young students, so I know exactly that you know where I am right now. I'm located downtown, One Court Square, Montgomery, Alabama, looking straight up Dexter Avenue, right? That's how I'm looking right now. You all can't see it, but if I were to turn around, you can see it. I am located right downtown Montgomery, Alabama, and Dexter Avenue is right behind me. And the importance here is we are on a historic corridor where in which civic engagement and civic responsibility has taken place, all right? And it continues to take place down this corridor, okay? So the focus of our lecture today is going to be civic responsibility, all right? And civic engagement, and how you can become more civically responsible and engaged as young, astute scholars so that you can make your mark in society, all right? And make the changes that you want to see happen in this American democracy. So, without further ado, we're going to go to some other places located here in the city, not all of them, but a couple of other places where in which we find civic responsibility actually taking place, or where they take place, or where it takes place. So I'm going to stop here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop in the car, and we're going to ride on up the road, and we're going to go to the Capitol building, and we're going to go and see that historic building located right downtown Montgomery, Alabama, and briefly take a look at it. Can't go inside right now, but we can come right on the outside and take a look and see and talk about how civic responsibility takes place within that specific building. All right, so let's go on ahead and start on our adventure without further ado. See you in a minute.
Good morning once again. Well, we're back talking about civic responsibility, and what I have on this slide before you is the definition of civic responsibility. So what is it? As the slide reads, it is the responsibility of citizens in a society to exhibit certain attitudes and actions related to participation in society and democratic governance. This is the definition of civic responsibility. And this is something that you all are going to become more informed about today. Now, let's talk about civic responsibility versus civic duty and know the difference between the two. So, civic responsibility encompasses these things. Number one, voting. This is something that you can do. Second thing is registering others to vote. That too is a form of civic responsibility. Also, participation in local government. And we'll take a tour to our local city hall, and you all will see where this is located and how you can get involved. Peaceful protest, keeping the environment clean, volunteering, such as volunteering at community centers, on campaigns, or with civic associations. These are all elements of civic responsibility. Now, civic duty, these are paying taxes, attending school, jury duty, selective service, and obeying the laws. Now, the main difference between the two is that with civic duty, these are legally binding. You have to pay your taxes. You have to attend school because of a compulsory education law. If you get a jury duty slip in the mail, typically you have to go, even though many of us like, selective service. When you turn 18, men, you have to register for selective service. And then also we're all expected to obey the laws to make sure that everyone remains safe in our society. Now, another thing I want to talk about is our U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These are the first 10 amendments that are encompassed in our United States Constitution. You're probably asking, why is she talking about the United States Constitution when she's talking about civic responsibility? Because the two are intertwined, and we have to understand those rights that we have as citizens to be able to understand how we can become more civically responsible. What you're going to see throughout this slideshow is a lot of references basically to the First Amendment, especially when we start talking about peaceful protest. So let's briefly go through these, and I want you all to become familiar with these 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, because these are things that you're probably going to see later on during the school year if you have not yet seen them in your previous educational pursuits in your earlier years. So the First Amendment is freedom of religion, speech, assembly, and petition of the government for a redress of grievances. Your Second Amendment deals with the well-regulated militia and the right of the citizens or people to keep and bear arms. The Third Amendment pertains to quartering of soldiers in time of peace or war without the owner's consent and in a manner prescribed by law, if so necessary. The Fourth Amendment, right of the people to be secure in their homes, in their papers, in their effects, against unreasonable search and seizure and the issuance of warrants, but on probable cause. Fifth Amendment, right to a grand jury, freedom from double jeopardy, the right to due process of law, and the assurance of just compensation in cases of eminent domain. Eminent domain means the taking of private property for public use. The Sixth Amendment is a right to a speedy trial, the ability to confront witnesses, and then also the ability to obtain witnesses in your favor. The Seventh Amendment is the right to trial by jury in civil cases. The Eighth Amendment, freedom from excessive bail, cruel and unusual punishment. Ninth Amendment, now we start to tie in how these amendments apply in the United States Constitution and also to the people. All right, so the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And the last amendment is powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to these states are reserved to the states and the people respectively. So this is your U.S. Bill of Rights, the U.S. Bill of Rights, or the Bill of Rights as mentioned or stated in the United States Constitution. These are the rights of the citizens that shall not be denied or taken away by government. And this is really important when we start talking about civic responsibility. All right, so let's look at our next slide. Voting. This is one of the most powerful and one of the most important forms of civic responsibility that all of us can engage in. Now, it's visible. It's one of the ones we all see. Many of you all probably have gone to the polling places with your parents, with your grandparents, with your aunts or uncles or guardians. And as mentioned, this is a form of civic responsibility. Every state implements voting laws for its specific jurisdiction. However, the right to vote is protected by the Constitution of the United States. And there are 3 amendments that I have here on the slide before you that deal specifically with voting. And it is mentioned, and these amendments are found where? In the Constitution. That's correct. So the 15th Amendment, which was passed and ratified in 1870, guarantees the right of African Americans to vote, or basically states that no one shall be denied the right to vote based on creed or race. The 19th Amendment pertains to the right for women to vote. So we see here that women did not gain the right to vote until 1920. That's a long way off from 1870, isn't it? And then the 26th Amendment guarantees that you can vote at the age of 18. So basically, with the 26th Amendment, we find that the voting age dropped from 21 to 18. And there's a whole story around that as well, because we were in the war at that time, and young people felt, hey, if I can go and fight in a war, then I should be able to practice my civic responsibility and be able to cast a vote and make decisions that are affecting me and the rest of the country. All right? Now, let's talk about this 15th Amendment a little bit. This is very important when we talk about civic responsibility, because in history in the United States, there were a group of people that were not seen as citizens until the passage of the 14th Amendment. And we're talking about African Americans in the United States. So with the 15th Amendment, we find that African American men gained the right to vote. During the period from about 1868 up until 1877, we have a period called Reconstruction here in the United States. This is immediately following the Civil War. We know that the southern states had to actually pay their allegiance back to the Union or back to the United States because they had ceded earlier and became the Confederate States. And this Civil War, when it ended, we find that the United States won, and also certain rights were given, or certain rights were passed to ensure that African Americans were seen as citizens of the United States, and that slavery was over, and then more importantly, that African Americans had a political voice, all right? Being able to practice their civic responsibility, all right? Now, this is also very important when we deal with Reconstruction period and these Reconstruction amendments, because not only do we find African American men actually participating in casting a vote for individuals who would represent their interest, but we saw strides made by numerous African American men who decided, what would it be like if I decided to run for this public office? So we saw an uptick or a surge of African American men who were running for elected office. That's also a form of practicing civic engagement and responsibility. Winning these seats, and then also passing effective laws for the betterment of the African American population and for the nation as a whole. So what I want to do on the next slide is I want you all to take a look at these individuals. Okay, with this slide, we're looking at 7 gentlemen who are part of a historic sketch, and these men are of importance because these are 7 men who were elected to serve in the 41st and the 42nd Congress of the United States of America immediately following the end of the Civil War. This was during that Reconstruction period when African American males gained the right to vote, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, many of them decided to throw their hat in the ring and run for elected office. So you have these men seated here, and I have them listed from left to right. The first person we have is Hiram Revels, who was a Mississippi United States House of Representatives, member of the United States House of Representatives. He also served as a senator of the United States. Well, he served from 1869 to 1871. Remember the point that I told you earlier during Reconstruction? It started around 1868 and ended in 1877. So that's a long period of time from 69 to 71, considering that the U.S. House of Representatives members are reelected or elected every 2 years. The second person we have is Benjamin Sterling Turner. Look at where he's from, guys. He's from Alabama, all right? So he served and represented the state of Alabama in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1871 to 1873. We have Robert C. DeLarge from South Carolina, serving from 1871 to 73, basically just one term there. Hosea Thomas Walls from Florida, U.S. House of Representatives from 1871 to be exact, to 1877. And Jefferson Franklin Long From Georgia, U.S. House of Representatives, 1869 to 71. Joseph Rainey. From South Carolina, U.S. House of Representatives from 1869 to 1879, and Robert Brown Elliott from South Carolina, U.S. House of Representatives from 1871 to 1875. By far, during this period of Reconstruction, when we deal with the African American vote and then and African Americans practicing civic responsibility and the number of African American men who actually ran for elected office at the national level, state level, and local level, by far, many of the representatives actually came from Mississippi and also from South Carolina. Now, what's really interesting is when we get to the next slide, look at this. We find the three gentlemen who were elected to serve at the national level that were elected during Reconstruction, and all three of these men were from Alabama. James T. Rapier, Benjamin S. Turner, and Jeremiah Harrelson, who was the very last African-American male to be elected to serve in the national legislature during Reconstruction. Now, this is important because after 1877, after Reconstruction ended, after the Union troops were pulled from the South, we began to see some reversion or reverting back to some of the old ways, and African American men almost lost the right to vote. And then we had a lack of participation and representation at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level because of these different practices and policies that were put in place in the southern states to effectively deny African Americans the right to vote again, and also denied them political representation. So you probably have heard some of these policies in the past. There were things such as the grandfather clause. Basically, if your grandfather did not vote before the year 1868, neither could you, okay? There were literacy tests that were put in place, basically indicating or stating that individuals had to be able to read effectively certain portions of the Constitution verbatim, word for word, not skipping a beat, not making a mistake in order to be able to register to vote. There was a voucher system that was put in place to deny African Americans the right to vote. And there were many other types of policies that were put in place to effectively eliminate the vote and the voice and political and civic responsibility of African American males. Furthermore, there were extra-legal methods that were a little bit more terrorizing than just the policies that were put in place that effectively, we'll say it kind of scared African Americans from even registering to vote or registering others to vote, which was a form of civic responsibility. Not only voting, but also registering others to vote is a form of civic responsibility. So all of this occurs and continues to happen, we'll say after 1877, and we really didn't see any effective changes, policy changes, coming about to end this scourge until about 1965. And we're going to talk about that in a later slide. So this next slide, I want you all to take a look at political representation at the state level in Alabama during Reconstruction.
Hello guys, I am back now, and now we're in a different location. We're in front of the Alabama State Capitol, and of significant importance, something that I want to point out to you is a historic marker that is entitled Black Members of the Alabama Legislature who served during the Reconstruction period of 1868 to 1879. Now, I am not going to read through all of these names that are listed on this marker. However, I just want to point out that it lists the names of those Black legislators who served from 1868 all the way up until 1879. Now, this was, of course, the period of Reconstruction here in the southern states, in which there were 5 various districts that were set up within the southern states to ensure that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were actually being adhered to in the South, and then also ensuring that those southern states that ceded from the Union were reincorporated back into the Union after giving allegiance again and swearing to uphold the Constitution of the United States. So without further ado, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this around so that you all can see exactly what I'm talking about. And I'll read out the first list of names from 1868 to 1869, and then from there I will go down to the last list of names, or only one name, from 1878 to 1879, where it was only one individual who served in the House, the Alabama House, not the Alabama Senate, but only one in the Alabama House. So hold on one second, and we're going to get right there. All right, so I am holding the camera up, and I hope that you all can see this. I'll back some, and it's kind of sunny out here today. But as you can see, this marker reads, Black members of the Alabama legislature who served during the Reconstruction period of 1868 to 1879. From 1868 to 1869, in the Senate, in the Alabama Senate, you had Benjamin F. Royal from Bullock County. In the House, you had Benjamin Alexander, from Greene County, James H. Austin from Macon County, Samuel Blandon from Lee County, John Carraway from Mobile County, George Cox from Montgomery County, Thomas H. Diggs from Barber County, Joseph Drawn from Dallas County, Ovid Gregory from Mobile County, James K. Green from Hell County, Daniel H. Hill from Bullock County, George Houston from Sumter, Benjamin Inge from Sumter, Columbus Jones from Madison, Shandy Wesley Jones from Tuscaloosa, Horace King from Russell, Thomas Lee from Perry County, Green Shadrach Washington Lewis from Perry County, Jefferson McCauley from Madison County, A.G. Richardson from Wilcox County, James Shaw from Mobile County, Lawrence S. Speed from Bullock County, W.L. Taylor from Chambers County, Holland Thomas from Montgomery County, William D. Turner from Elmore County, Spencer Weaver from Dallas County, Lottie J. Williams from Montgomery County. Now, as I mentioned, there are other names here. There are the members who served in the Senate and in the House from 1870 to 1871. I'm not going to read through all of those names. The members who served in the Senate and in the House from 1872 to 1873, and then those from 1874 to 1875, and then also 1876 to 1877, and last but not least, from 1878 to 1879. Now, what's of significance is that we look at the numbers and how they begin to dwindle as Reconstruction begins to end. So from 1878 to 1879, there were no individuals who were serving in the Senate of African American descent, but in the House, there was only one by the name of George English. So before you all start back to school for the fall semester, or for the 2020-2021 school year, I encourage you to come to downtown Montgomery and look at this historic marker that is located directly in front of the state capitol building that looks down Dexter Avenue. So this is where this particular marker is located. And you can take a look at all of the names yourselves and see what counties these individuals represented, and possibly do some research as well. You may have a paper or a project that you may have to do for school this coming year, and this will be an excellent research project for any of these members who served in the Alabama legislature during the period of Reconstruction from 1868 to 1879, as listed here on this historic marker that is provided or was erected by the Alabama Historical Commission in 2011. Okay, turning this back around, I hope you all got that, and we'll continue on with our presentation and go through some other slides.
Okay, as you all just saw with that marker that was represented, you understand now the importance of political representation, voting as civic responsibility for a group of Americans who were long denied access to the ballot box and long denied any rights, all right, and being able to express or participate in the political process here in the United States. Now, I'm going to go to another slide, and we're going to pick up here around 1865, all right? This is important because we're dealing with the Selma to Montgomery March. This is a point in time well after all of the extra-legal methods, well after all of the codes, black codes that were put in place in the South, well after all of the policies which denied African Americans a right to the ballot box, started to come to an end because people got tired. People felt that their voice should be heard, that they needed representation, that they should be able to elect individuals, right, who represented their interests. In this representative democracy in which we live, this is how we participate in government. This is how we practice our civic responsibility. If we ourselves choose not to run for elected office, we elect someone to run, or we choose someone, or we elect those individuals who choose to run, and they will express our interests by passing effective public policy. So let's take a look at this very next slide. This is the Selma to Montgomery March slide, which is also located in front of the Alabama State Capitol. Let's hear what's going on here.
Okay, guys, this is one more marker that's in front of the Alabama State Capitol, and this is the Selma to Montgomery March marker. And I'm going to read this one off to you all as well. Probably can't see it because of the sun and the font may be kind of small, but this particular marker pertains to voting and civic responsibility and participation when it comes to voting, all right? So many of you all have probably heard of the story. You probably have learned of the importance of the Selma to Montgomery March and how this culminated in the Voting Rights Act that was passed underneath the administration of Lyndon Baines Johnson in '65. But let's look at this marker first, okay? So the Selma to Montgomery March ended here on March 25th, 1965, when 25,000 civil rights marchers arrived at the Alabama State Capitol to demand the right to vote for African Americans. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders addressed the marchers and the nation, culminating a series of demonstrations that began in Selma on March 7th, known as Bloody Sunday, when some 600 peaceful protesters were savagely beaten by lawmen as they tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now I'm going to go over to the other side of this marker, okay, because it's continued on the back. And this is of importance. I want you all to know this information so that you are well-rounded citizens and you know the importance of your vote and being civically responsible. Now continuing on, it indicates that in January 1965, activists led by Dr. King launched a series of voter registration drives and demonstrations to secure the right of black citizens to register and vote in Alabama elections, a constitutional right impeded by Governor George Wallace and other officials. They were met with state-sponsored terrorism. On the night of February 18th, in Marion, amid a melee that began when police started clubbing peaceful protesters, a state trooper shot and killed a young black man, Jimmy Lee Jackson. Infuriated by Jackson's murder, leaders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference called upon the residents of Alabama's Black Belt counties to peacefully march on the Alabama Capitol to demand voting reforms. Less than 5 months after the last of the 3 marches, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law. Okay, so as I was indicating, this particular marker is of importance. I'll turn it around sideways so that you can see it, the back side, okay? This one too is located downtown Montgomery, right in front of the Capitol building. In the proximity or in the direction facing down Dexter Avenue. So you all can take a look at this marker, be familiar with it, come out and read it for yourselves and learn your history and learn the importance of this special corridor that I talked about in the very beginning, where we've seen a lot of civil action and civil responsibility that has actually taken place right here in your own hometown or where you go to school right now. So become familiar with these various places if you have not done so yet. And come down and look at some of this history for yourself so that you have some political knowledge of what it means to be a civically engaged and civically responsible citizen of Montgomery.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to the next form of civic responsibility, another element, which ties closely into voting. That is registering others to vote. As you can see here, we have on this slide a state of Alabama postcard voter registration form and this big sticker, register to vote. During the period from about, we'll say 1868, when African Americans gained the right to vote, 1870 when African American men gained the right to vote, all the way up until 1865, and even after that, we saw throngs of individuals registering to vote and registering others to vote. You too, if you're 18 years of age and you know the process, you can work and help get others registered to vote, because this is how you express your needs, your wants, and what you want to see happen in your society. Believe it or not, we have an election coming up, do we not? Does anyone know the date? It's coming upon us very, very, very quickly. We've got one coming up actually this month. Next week, we have a local election that's actually coming up. It is a runoff election that's happening. And then we have a bigger election that's happening on November 3rd. What election is that? That's our general election. So we're going to vote for the President of the United States and different congressional members on the 3rd of November. And guess what? If you will be 18 years of age before the 3rd of November, you can go ahead and get registered to vote now, because I'm expecting you, and I'm sure other people in society are expecting you to what? Turn up, turn out, and be civically responsible and cast your vote, all right? And cast your ballot for the candidate of your choice for the upcoming general election that will take place on November 3rd. So don't forget that date. Don't forget that you can register to vote. And if you want to know how you can register to vote, you can reach out to me, and you can come to the library as well. And they will help you get registered to vote. Hopefully COVID's over by that time, so we can, get more folks, more young people who want to practice their civic responsibility and be civically engaged can get registered to vote. So don't forget that at 18, you can vote in the general election. So this is a way in which you practice civic responsibility. There are various groups that are involved in registering others to vote. During the 1950s, the 30s, the 40s, during that period of time when African Americans were denied access to the ballot box, there were still groups that were operating and participating and going out actively to register others to vote. We have the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who went out to help and get others registered to vote. You had CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, that was going out to help get others registered to vote. You had SNCC, which I've already mentioned. You had the NAACP, which was going out and getting others registered to vote. You had the MIA, or the Montgomery Improvement Association, a very important association that operated right here in Montgomery, Alabama, that was helping to get others registered to vote. And you had a group called the Women's Political Council that also assisted in helping to get others registered to vote. So people's voices could be heard. Individuals could cast their ballot to see the change that they wanted to happen in their communities and in their states and at the national level when it came to public policy and how it would affect them. Okay? Now, the next thing I want to take you to is local government and how you can be an engaged and informed citizen in local government. Because not only do we elect individuals and not only do we register others to vote to participate in state government or national government, but also local government. Your city council members, your mayor, police chief, those individuals. All right, so let's take a look at our next slide.
All right, right here, Montgomery City Hall. All right, this is the historic marker located right downtown Montgomery, Alabama, on Perry Street, highlighting highlighting or giving you the background information of Montgomery City Hall. All right, so this is something that's very interesting because we find that following a fire in 1932 that destroyed a 19th century City Hall, architect Frank Lockwood designed a replacement for the same site. With the Depression affecting all construction projects during the period, the city received federal assistance through the Works Progress Administration. Completed in 1937, the City Hall included offices for city officials and an auditorium to accommodate large crowds for public programs, debutante balls, and social gatherings. Stylistically, the building's exterior and mayor's offices reflect the neoclassical influences with highly decorative detailing in the grand entrance to the auditorium. So this is the historic marker, 1936-1937, when City Hall was actually built. So I'm going to pan the camera around here, and this building right here in front of me is where we find City Hall. This is where you as a citizen, right, can come. You can come with your grandparents, you can come with your parents, you can come with your guardians, right? And this is where the public meetings actually take place. City Hall meetings. As I mentioned to you when we were standing in front of the Capitol, I said there's a locality here in the city where which we have the gathering of our local public officials, those representatives whom we elect to make public policy on our behalf. This is where it is done, right here in front of us, in front of City Hall, okay? So you can come in, you can actually sit in and hear the meetings and actually listen to some of the things that are being deliberated upon that are going to affect you as a citizen of Montgomery. This is a way in which you are becoming, or a way in which you are civically engaged, all right? And it's a form of civic responsibility. So not only just voting, right, but showing up and finding out what's actually happening, what's going on, what policies are actually being passed. So we can't go in this building today, unfortunately, it's closed, right? But I do want to give you all a glimpse of it so you know exactly where it is, what it looks like, and you can probably come with someone, if you haven't come already, with a parent or a grandparent or a friend or a cousin or an uncle or a guardian, all right? And listen to public policy taking place and the role that you play as a citizen actually taking place in real time when you attend City Hall meetings, okay? So we'll stop here and we'll go.
Oh, okay, so you all just saw historic City Hall located downtown Montgomery, Alabama. And this is where local policy is actually made. They actually had a meeting last night, a city council meeting, and citizens came in and they listened to those city council members deliberate on public policy, which we call ordinances, which affect us at the local level. That is a form of civic engagement by going in and listening to those meetings and listening to those deliberations. And when you all get a chance, I kindly ask someone that you know, a parent or a guardian or a friend or a cousin, to take you to one of those meetings so you can see how civic responsibility and also being involved in the political process take place in real time. All right, now we're going to go to our next element of civic responsibility, protesting. Now, this one right here is important because we've seen a lot of protests this summer. Have we not? Sure we have. And they're continuing even until this day, all right? One of the things that we saw on a previous slide was a protest, a peaceful protest that took place in 1965, right? When those individuals marched from Selma to Montgomery, advocating for voting rights. That was protesting, peaceful protesting. That ties directly into the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Right to peaceably assemble, the right to petition government for redress of grievances, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion. Of importance here, when we're looking at the protests that have been occurring this summer and the protests that occurred, let's say in 1965, we're talking about the ability of citizens to gather and petition the government for redress of grievances. So I want you all to just take a look at this slide and look at this amalgamation or this hodgepodge of images that are placed here on this slide. On the top right-hand corner, we have the George Floyd protest, which just happened this summer. We also have George Floyd protest right directly in the middle, right here at the White House. And we also have another Floyd protest over on the far left. Same thing down here at the bottom, and then also another one here at the bottom left as well. We saw young people, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, culture, creed, coming together and petitioning government for a redress of grievances. What's really important here is that I want you all to understand is that not only were these individuals of all ages and races and colors and creeds coming together to petition government just in the streets, but many of them marched to their city halls and their places of government. And they called out to their elected officials. They did letter writing, they did phone calls, they did emails. So it takes both, all right? It takes also the mental work of calling, of writing, of emailing, of meeting, and then also the peaceful protest that occurred for the most part for a petition of the redress of grievances. Now I'm going to ask you all a few questions pertaining to this slide. And I want you all to think long and hard on these questions because this is something I want you all to be able to write small essays about at the end of this presentation. When we see all of these individuals who have come together this summer and protested peacefully, last summer, the summer before that, and throughout the ages, I want you to think about the different things that individuals have been protesting for over the years. That's the first question. Number two, do you think they actually got their demands or had their demands met through the passage of public policy by actually being able to speak to their mayors and their city council members or their elected officials at the state level or the national level? Do you think that brought about any change? Something to think about. Do you think the protest of this summer is going to bring about some effective visual changes when we talk about policing, when we talk about equal treatment under the law as covered in the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution? So think long and hard on these questions that I just asked you all, and I want you all to be able to analyze and write your answers. And I'll give you an email address at the end of the slide so you can email me your answers and we can stay in contact and we can discuss these matters, okay? All right, so let's go to our next form of civic responsibility. It's that of keeping your environment clean, all right? So when we're dealing with keeping the environment clean, we're talking about your neighborhoods, your communities, right? The nation, the world. That's very, very important because we want to have an earth that's going to be around when you all get older. Get my age. I won't tell you my age, but when you all get older so that you can actually make your mark on society and that you can be able to run for these elected offices and make change. We need some place for us to live on, to be here. So we have some images here of young people out protesting. We talked about protesting the last slide, but we also find people protesting on behalf of the environment and keeping the environment clean. So we have these young people here protesting last March 2019 for the climate change protest, right? Young folks from all around the world showed up en masse and spoke to their elected officials and world leaders. I don't know if you all remember the name Greta Thunberg, the young lady who's been making a mark in the world, saying, hey guys, you all need to do something about the carbon emissions, about global warming and the ice caps melting and trash in the oceans and oil spills and all of these things that effectively destroy our environment. It prevents us from having clean air to breathe. And we all want clean air to breathe. All right, so we have young people here at the top who took time out of their school day to actually protest and to actually bring to the attention of elected officials and world leaders the need to keep our environment clean. At the bottom, we have a picture of some young college-age guys who are out cleaning up the sand or cleaning up the beaches in California after an oil spill. That's keeping the environment clean. So when there's oil spills that occur, Think about who's affected. You can't go to the beach anymore because there's oil all on the sand and you can't enjoy that. The water's not clean. Think about the marine life, right? And how they're affected. Think about how your groceries could be affected when we have an unclean environment. So it's very important for us to be civically responsible in keeping our environment clean. The last slide is we have an ambassador, Ambassador Philip Goldberg, who was an ambassador to the United States, to the Philippines. He was the U.S. ambassador to the Philippines. He's there cleaning up one of the rivers with the locals in the Philippines. You see all the trash there, right? Think about how that affects the water in that country. Think about how it affects the health care of the citizens in that country, all right? So it's really important for us to see the connection with keeping the environment clean and also making sure that we have clean drinking water, we have food to eat, we have clean air, right? This is all part of civic responsibility. So keep your neighborhoods clean and keep your waterways clean and keep your communities clean. This is a way in which you can become involved in exercising your civic responsibility or finding groups that do this locally and joining those groups and helping to clean up the environment. There's a big one called Greenpeace that actually works internationally, but there are young people who are involved there in helping to keep the environment clean. All right. The next one we can do is volunteer, all right? So volunteerism is actually the policy or practice of volunteering one's time or talents for charitable, educational, or other worthwhile activities, especially in one's own community, all right? So if you choose to work on a Clean Up the Environment campaign, volunteering your time, all right? Feeding those who are less fortunate, that's volunteering your time. Right? Coming to the library and helping to reshelve books. That's volunteering your time, right? So why do we volunteer? One of the things we do is, one of the reasons why we do this is because we want to help others. And then also it helps to create connections with others. You gain new friends, right? You sometimes they're lifelong friends, right? You meet people who can help you out with your career skills. A door may be open for you, all right? And you may get a job somewhere, all right? Or someone may see you doing good work and say, hey, I want this young person to come speak to my class or come speak to other young people about the importance of civic responsibility or volunteering. And then it also creates a sense of fulfillment within yourself because you've done something to help someone else, all right? And you've done something, not only are you helping someone else, but in the process you're helping yourself. All right, so volunteering is an important form of civic responsibility by giving back to your community so that you all can help others understand the importance of this democratic system or this democratic republic in which we live. It takes a village. It takes all of us participating in some type of way, whether it's through voting, whether it's through peaceful protest, whether it's for running for office, whether it's attending a city council meeting, or whether it's volunteering your time to be able to work this or make this democratic republic actually work, okay? All right, so we're gonna wrap up now. And one of the things I want to do is thank you all for listening to this presentation. I know it was long, but hopefully you got some good stuff out of it, and hopefully you got some stuff that you can apply, some useful knowledge that you can apply this coming school year. Now, don't think that there's not any homework, because there is, all right? Remember the questions I asked you on slide 13? I want you to continue to ponder those questions, and you probably can go back and look at that slide and some of the questions I asked you in that slide. But I also want you to look at these questions here on the screen. There's about 10 of them here. So I want you all to think about what are the different ways you can practice civic responsibility. I want you to think about what the significance of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are to the Constitution. We didn't talk about that much, but I want you all to look up those amendments because they tie directly into this period of Reconstruction that we talked about earlier, all right? Why is voting considered a very important form of civic responsibility? In what amendments of the Constitution can we find references to voting? We talked about that early on during the presentation. What are the names of at least 5 of the African American legislators who served during Reconstruction in Alabama? Where would you go to learn more about local politics and how policies are made? Remember we talked about that? Why are the Bill of Rights significant? What amendment protects the right to peaceably assemble and protest? And do you believe it is important to volunteer? Explain why. Have you ever volunteered in your community? If so, what did you do? And last but not least, how are civic responsibilities different from civic duties? Something else we discussed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my young, astute scholars, you all are going to have a wonderful school year, and you're going to make all A's. Yep, you're going to make all A's, and I'm going to hear about it through the library because somebody's going to come back and tell someone in the library that they made the honor roll. And I'm going to cheer. I'm going to be your cheerleader, and I want you all to do well, do good, okay? Do good to yourselves, do good in your community, do good to each other, okay? So hopefully we'll see each other again, maybe next summer, and we'll talk about another important topic pertaining to civic engagement and how to become more involved in the democratic process. All right, guys, you all have a great rest of the summer and a good school year. See you later.